Let's now speak to the Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, hoping now to get a clearer line. Minister, very good evening to you. Thank you for your time. And I'm hoping that we will be able to hear you this time around. Talk to us a little bit about this one-stop shop for aspiring entrepreneurs. How will it empower and assist?
Thank you so much, and apologies for the network challenges that we experienced earlier. Of course, small businesses have been complaining about the fact that for them to access services from the portfolio, they've got to move from another entity to another entity. And in most of the time, the priorities were not aligned. You will get that the business plan that they were assisted by another entity, for example, CEDA, it doesn't talk to the priorities of CIFA, and therefore they get them to be declined and the funding not approved. Now, bringing all these agencies together seeks to address that gap amongst other things, but to ensure that we provide the integrated support to both the cooperatives, the micro, the small and medium enterprises in the various sectors of our economy. By doing that, you're not only assisting them and trying to cut the time that gets to be wasted as they apply for services, but you also give an opportunity to a business that can be provided with financial support that must also in turn receive both the pre-investment support and post-investment support, because we would have put all these interventions under one agency. Therefore, it's easier to make an assessment before you provide the financial support, just like it is easier to monitor and provide the mentoring or the post-investment support to ensure sustainability of the businesses. So we see it as a major milestone in the life of the SMMs of our country.
My previous guest, Tebogo Haas, spoke a bit about the powers that you've been vested with. For one, you'll be now tasked with regulating and classifying micro, small and medium enterprises. And of course, having to now ensure that the unique needs of these businesses are adequately addressed. But how are you going to do that? And also just taking into account some of the feedback around this new role and the breaking down of these businesses in the different categories, the definition for one may be exclusionary. That's according to some reaction I've gotten this evening, and that rather the focus should be on startups, because what happens in a year's time, a business that you've deemed micro now is no longer micro and now moved to being a medium-sized business. How are you going to monitor that? And is it not best to focus on startups?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong to say the minister may be is empowered to make regulations. Because remember, when the minister set the criteria that determines the classification of whether it's micro or small or medium, it has an appreciation of the development phases of the business. Now, the reason the minister is empowered by law is to say when the economy changes and when certain businesses advance, the minister is therefore able to say, in this particular sector, this is what is the definition of small. For example, Teluco makes mention, as he prefers the utilization or the use of the word startup. He mentions the fact that in the mining industry, for example, if you were to consider utilizing the annual turnover, 50 million rand is nothing.
Yeah.
Same applies to the technology space. So as you make those determinations, you are looking at the economic advancement of the sector. So you move today like it was previously asset-based. Now you are aware that asset-based is no longer working. But as the time goes on, then you get to improve. Of course, at the center of it is not only just waking up and saying, now we begin to say this is the criteria that we set. It is about studying the entire segments of the sectors and be able to say, now if they participate at this level, it means now they're at a medium level, and therefore you transition them to being big businesses. And again, as I said, that is not something that we would wake up and do, because we conduct research, we work with sector specialists that must be able to look at the growth of performance of those small businesses. This is what this act seeks to do, to give the minister that power. As things stand, everybody is small. You get to businesses where others they still refuse, although they are making 3 billion rands a year, and they will tell you we're still small businesses. Whilst we have an appreciation that in certain sectors indeed, if you go, for example, to the automotive space, you'll find that a business that makes 2 billion rands, indeed it is a medium business. But now that must find expression within the law, so that when you protect these businesses, they are protected with a baseline that says in this sector we are aware this is what is happening, and therefore this category and that category belong to this segment. And the rights, therefore, that must be enjoyed are 1, 2, 3 as defined with whatever agreement that we would have set.
The other matter, of course, is around the regulations that are yet to be drawn to now determine the efficacy of this this one-stop shop. What pointers will you be looking at as you draw up those regulations? Because expectations are high on this front, more so with businesses facing so many challenges, access to finance, access to markets, and of course sometimes dealing with being regulated and certified to be able to provide that bulk order that needs to happen if you're a small business and you've got a big deal. But of course, the loopholes are still around whether or not you're certified, whether you're operating with the right equipment, and all of those challenges. How are you going to be defining the details in order to make sure that it is beneficial to businesses?
Well, the first thing is that the Act enables us to establish the Office of the Ombudsman, which will be dealing with the unfair trade practices. Then the minister comes in to define what is it that we refer to as the unfair trade practice. And for the minister to do that, there will be recommendations that are sent by the Ombudsman, and the minister will therefore gather those to say, this is the thinking in line with whatever that has been raised. And then we gather that for inputs for the members of the society or of the sector to make inputs. And then upon receiving inputs, then the minister may then finalize and issue those declarations. Of course, you are aware that there's lots of victimization of SMMEs, which is what also led to us saying there's a need for us to review this legislation and give authority to the department to be able to hold people accountable through the Office of the Ombudsman, wherein we are saying the decisions or the findings by the Office of the Ombudsman are legally binding. Right now, we can't penalize anyone who's failing to comply with the 30 days notice because we didn't have authority to do that. For example, we couldn't intervene when big corporates are undermining or exploiting the small and medium enterprises by just cancelling their contracts. Because you will be told that it's a contract between two parties. Now we're able to determine all of those and help with contract management so that we can monitor the other moves that we are also planning to do, that we're having engagements about, is to ensure that, for example, where government says 30% will be given to SMMEs, government must be transparent to say this is what 30% entails. And at some point when we advance and capacities have been built, we then be able to say, therefore, the SMMEs must be paid directly by the contracting party on 30%, so that you avoid them being exploited by the big corporates that intend not to pay them on time or pay them at all, or just decide to cancel their contract.
Yeah.
So all these regulations, when we put them in place, looking at what the Ombudsman does, and then with the final arbiter being the minister, are looking at really reducing the burden and the red tape that are faced by small businesses. Others, they use certain criteria that they set to exclude the participation of small businesses. You would read a particular tender, and when you read the spec, this is automatically made for big businesses. And it is such instances where we are saying we are not going to allow for SMMEs to be excluded to participate in their own economy deliberately. Let them say by not meeting certain things because they can't afford to, but it shouldn't be a deliberate intent from anyone to say you're going to exclude small and medium enterprises.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, of course, discussing with us further around the details, the finer details of this bill.